Greetings everyone, welcome back to my sketchbook. I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a brain dump here, and I'm going to bring out some dinky cars to show you, and then maybe just do a kind of a doodle. So, well, let's start off with this. And one could say that there is some controversy, some controversy involved in this, but really what I want to aim at is there are people that have sort of a vision of what life is like or could be like, and that rubs people the wrong way, sometimes for good reason. This is a Tesla Model X, and this is like a SpaceX edition of that. Of course, you can get other versions of this car, like these, for example. You can get the Y. I mean, there's other things as well. This is the Model Y. He's also worked on a few other things, so like an updated version, I guess you could say, even of this. So like the first version of Tesla, even before, Elon got involved. So, I mean, he didn't, like, he's not one of the founders of the company, but this is sort of like the Elise, Lotus Elise. Kind of a cool machine. What you end up seeing most often is this thing, which I guess he kind of commissioned. I don't know if he sat down with a ruler and said, "Oh, yeah, we gotta do something like this." And of course, you can see something like this as well. So the Cybertruck, what an interesting thing that is. Can you imagine an all stainless steel something or other thing that drives around and it's got all these cool angles? Can you imagine something like these? So these are DeLoreans. Now, these are in sort of special colors, I suppose, as part of the 80s Hot Wheels lineup. This is part of a grouping that I'm giving away to somebody that actually owns a DeLorean. Here are some other versions of that. Now, these are part of the art car line. And if you notice, there's a T on these, so even on the graphic that's on the card itself. That's interesting, don't you think? That there's a T on here. Perhaps it has to do with how most of us kind of recognize the DeLorean as one of these. So, time machines. How strange and how wonderful. There's one in hover mode and this one as if it's driving on the ground. How wild of a car is that? And of course, if it even matters, they are looking at what the future could possibly be for the company. That is the DeLorean Alphas. And let's look at something interesting here. Well, that's really weird. Almost like, well, I'm not going to ramble on too much about it. I mean, there's similarities in cars and all that kind of stuff, purposeful or not. So what popped into my head when I was looking at those things? Well, I'm going to open up the inkwell here. It has to do with the T that's on a couple of those cars. Like this thing up here. And this one, which is on the car down here. It reminds me of somebody else that kind of looked into the future and wanted to do something kind of special, and that would be Preston Tucker. And he built 51 cars, and for some reason, I mean, other than going bankrupt, it went nowhere. Now, it's hard to really compete with big companies, and this was sort of the problem that Nikola Tesla, the inventor and engineer, and anyway, he couldn't really compete with some of the big dogs, and they basically just kind of beat him down constantly, even though he knew about stuff. Now, I don't have a Tucker in front of me. I kind of know what they look like, and my idea here is what happens if Doc goes back in time with the DeLorean breaks down, and he gets hold of a Tucker. So that's kind of what the idea in my head is. And just for fun, well, let's start off by drawing a couple of things. So first thing I'm going to start off drawing, and let's zoom in on something here. And does that look like it's going to lock down? All right. So we burnt a little more than 6 minutes just rambling on about this stuff. First thing I'm going to sort of draw here is a flux capacitor. And I don't know, we'll see how this goes. Oh, I should dip the pen here, make sure there's ink. Now, I don't have this thing memorized. I know roughly what it looks like. And I'm pretty sure I can do a version of it, so. I'm going to draw a little triangle there, but that's just to get things to connect the way that I kind of want them to. Yeah, this may not go exactly how I want. This is the burden of drawing from memory, I suppose. Sometimes you make enough room and sometimes you don't. Let's put a little curve there. I think we have enough to get around corners. We'll put it in like a little box. Now, I don't really know what the science behind the flux capacitor is really supposed to be. I'm supposing that somehow it's meant to help control the amount of power that would run through a vehicle. I believe it's something like, it's more than a gigawatt of power. And I would like to think that, you know, they sat around with some people and said, oh, let's kind of use some real scientific theory with that. But I mean, it's a work of fiction. I'm going to suggest that it's more kind of like, I don't want to call it junk science. Okay, so I'll call it junk science. For example, you know, time travel just doesn't seem probable in my head. You can prove me wrong, of course. But, you know, if you're on a planet that's constantly moving and you're going to go back in time and to a very specific position in something that's... Anyway, I'm not even going to ramble on about that stuff. And you might even say, well, does this have something to do with quantum entanglement, or I don't know. I mean, how does this relate to special relativity? How does this relate to quarks? Anyway, so that's roughly what a flux capacitor looks like. Not exactly. I mean, when you draw from memory, that's just how that goes. The Tesla logo, which I do have here, which I will use kind of as a quick reference. It looks like this. So let's see. Little something like that. Not perfectly. That's a rough idea. And then the Tucker logo looks a little like this. I remember watching that movie, and it kind of makes you think about the struggle that some people go through with their dreams. And with that one, you don't really get like a happy ending. And I don't really know what the overall sort of take you should have from that. Is it like maybe you should try and be okay with failing? I don't really know. I don't know what you're supposed to come away with that, because yeah, he was a broken man because of everything that went down. Now, that's rough and ugly. That's kind of the two symbols that we have here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go back in time with the DeLorean, and we're going to rebuild a Tucker. So let's see here. Where did I put that time machine? All right, so we're going to kind of use this. I'm going to set that to one side. I'm going to bring it out just a little bit. I don't really like the look of those logos, but I just drew them while rambling. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So the idea with the car, and I don't have the car in front of me, so I'm just kind of go with memory, see what I can come up with. It's a 4-door kind of vehicle. Let's start with that kind of a curve. And something like that. Of course, quite famous for like 3 headlight kind of look to them. We're only going to get to see a couple of headlights with this. Shape there. I believe it has something like this going on with it. Something like that. Bumper. I think we would go roughly something like that. As I said, it's a 4-door. And maybe like that there. I think some of the pictures that I saw, they were white walls. I believe Francis Ford Coppola, the director, has one, although I'm not sure if he has like a real one. I'm sure he might. But I believe they had recreations of them as well, especially for making that movie. Door handles like that. I think that's kind of the idea of what the car looks like. Not perfectly. Okay, so if that's kind of where my brain is with that, let's see what we can do to turn it into a time machine. Because Doc turns a steam engine into one. Why not a Tucker? Basically, I'm just drawing the same thing again, but kind of changing it in my brain a little bit. Now they have kind of a split window at the front. Not unlike the 63 split window Corvette. 3 headlights. I believe that Tucker also tried to get a military contract where that center light would have like a turret, which is kind of cool, I guess, but kind of spooky too. Would we put a spoiler on that thing? We're going to have like a Mr. Fusion back here. Oh, that's a terrible thing that I just did. So, I mean, just after the Second World War, they would have been playing around with nuclear technologies. Successful or not, I'm not really sure. I don't really trust some of the concepts that they would have had for believability's sake. I think they spent so much time with making up their abilities. So there's that, I suppose. You know, sometimes you tell people that you have a mean dog and no one really sees it, but you're happy to not interact with that person because you believe that they have that mean dog. And I wonder about that when it came to the nuclear program of the United States at that time. Because you watch some of those test videos and there's like unfortunate things where there are people that are enjoying viewing it, and they just put on their goggles, and it's outrageous to think that you would view such a thing. Now that's kind of the same thing that I drew, but just slightly more refined. There's Mr. Fusion there. And I drew, it's not really a spoiler as much as it's, is it, you know, I would think that the Tucker, the original Tucker, probably got away from using fins. And that's kind of what I did there. mean, they wouldn't have really had the fins to really play with. It's more of like a true 50s thing, I suppose. Split window. One door handle, the second door handle. White wall tire. The flames from tearing up the ground. Up here we'll say that this is the Tucker time machine. I think earlier I talked about quarks, and something kind of strange. I mean, most of the theoretical theorists, especially in, you know, relativity, quarks, if anyone ever asks you about them, just tell them that they're like an elementary particle, that there's like 4 fundamental forces, and it kind of reacts with the strongest of them. And as far as, you know, what they look like, you can say that they're like bottom or top, or down or up, or charmed or strange. That's a weird sort of description of them. But as far as their color, they're generally red, green, blue, much like, you know, televisions. Red, green, blue. Quarks. How wacky is that? So I'm almost done here. I mean, me just doing a brain dump and not really doing anything in particular. Just a doodle in my sketchbook. And we'll call it docs. This is docs. Tucker time machine. That'd have been funny if they actually would have used one of those in the movie, though, I think. Now, should I throw some color at that? I don't know if it's necessary. I think we might be pretty much done, but I'm going to bring out my good friend, the bunny pen, and I seem to like that light blue, so I'm going to throw some light blue on that, and then we'll just kind of call it done. I do find that I read some pretty strange things. I like to get hold of manuals, basically, and read those. I don't really read, well, other than comics, I suppose. I would read comics, but I don't pick up novels and read them too often. The majority of what I read is either something I'm going to get through very quick, or if I need to fix something, then I will read a manual. Those are kind of the things that I would spend most of my time with. I hope that looks a little bit like a Tucker. I think that's the rough shape of it anyway. And these are fins that would help with the aerodynamics unnecessarily for the Mr. Fusion, which we're going to put a little mark on it here. Whereas if we were close enough, weirdly, if something, I don't know how many of you notice this kind of stuff. I do recognize patterns though for some reason. Now this, in a lot of ways, might look like a reel-to-reel tape. But this is one of the signs that you would know that something might have radioactive contamination. It's not the same as the biohazard. So if you're into the WHMIS, Workplace Hazardous Information sheet or material sheet, you'd know that this is one of those hazards that you don't want to run into. Anyway, like I said, it's a brain dump. And that's it. I don't think I need to ramble on any more than that. You got to see some Teslas. You got to see some DeLorean time machines. And you got to hear me ramble on about Preston Tucker and quarks and flux capacitors. So that's it. I'm not really going to go any further than that. I hope you have a wonderful day, and thanks for hanging out. And yeah, if you want to hear me ramble on about other things, come back or make a suggestion. I don't know everything. I like to read about stuff, and I have a different take on a few things anyway, just from being around. So, all right. Ciao for now, folks.